Hi everyone, Kevin here. Today we are going to look at how you can use DaVinci Resolve 18. This is the latest and greatest version of the software. And joining me today, we have a very special guest, and he also happens to be one of my favorite YouTubers, Casey Ferris.
Hey man, thank you so much for having me. This is an honor to be on your channel. Very excited to kind of dive into things here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. And if you haven't heard of Casey Ferris before, he runs a YouTube channel that's dedicated to DaVinci Resolve, so it's a fantastic resource to learn more. You can get to his channel with the card up above, and I've also included a link down below in the description. Casey also has a course on DaVinci Resolve that goes even deeper than this video will today, so also worth checking out, and for that too, you'll find a link down below in the description. In this video today, Casey and we're going to assume that you have no background at all in DaVinci Resolve. We're going to start with the absolute basics of how you even get DaVinci Resolve. Then we'll look at how you can import media into DaVinci Resolve, how you can start telling your story on the timeline, and at the end, we'll look at how you could render your video so you could get it out to, say, YouTube or Facebook or any other video service. So basically, by the end of this video, you'll have a really good sense for how you can use DaVinci Resolve. If you'd like to follow along today, we've also included some sample files down below in the description, so you could access those and you could do exactly what we're doing today. So Casey, how do we even get DaVinci Resolve? Where do we go to get this software, this free video editing software?
Yeah, so it's pretty easy. Just go to blackmagicdesign.com and somewhere it should say DaVinci Resolve 18. You can click on that and we can click on this free download now button. And then what happens is you get to choose your version of Resolve. So there's Resolve 18 at this point, and it's in beta. There's also Resolve 17. I would recommend just getting Resolve 18 because it's a really solid build and has all the newest features and really good.
I always like going with beta. You always get the latest and greatest, so you sold me on that.
Yeah.
And then I see something called Studio and something without Studio. What's the difference between those two?
Yeah, so there's the standard version of Resolve, which is free and can do basically everything that you'd want to do when it comes to video editing, especially if you're just starting out. And then there's also the Studio version, which is about $300, and that is just a one-time fee. You can render over 4K. And there's, kind of some fancy things that probably not everybody needs, especially if you're just starting out. I would recommend with just going with the free version. So we click this, download it, and install it. And then when you open Resolve for the first time, it should look something like this. Now this window here is called your project manager. This is where you open and save new projects, where you can kind of import, export things. It's kind of all of your projects are all in this window. So, what I like to do is just go down and click on New Project, and it'll ask for a name. We'll say Kevin Cookie Company.
And Casey, I've got to say, I'm looking forward to seeing your take on this classic commercial for the Kevin Cookie Company. I could really use a professional to help pull this together. And, and once again, if you want to follow along, you'll find the sample files in the description down below. So you'll have all the same files that we're working with here.
So I was doing a little practice earlier, so we'll just say V2, and then we jump right into the edit page of Resolve. So you should be looking at something that looks kind of like this. And really how Resolve is structured is there are a few different kind of modes that Resolve has. Resolve is designed to pretty much do everything that you need to do after you're done shooting. So from managing and organizing your files to editing to color correction all the way to your final render. And really you can kind of switch Resolve into different focuses. And you do that by clicking these buttons down here, which will switch to different pages. I'm going to bring up some media here so that makes a little bit more sense. This first page is called the edit page. This is where you do your editing. This is actually where you take your media and put it together as a story. But we also have several different pages here, including a color correction page, which is designed just to do really fancy color correction and adjust your images. We have the fusion page, which is made for effects and graphics and all kinds of fancy things, compositing, explosions, all the things that you would ever want to do in your movie. We have a Fairlight page, which is how to get really detailed with your audio. And you can run all kinds of plugins and audio filters and anything that you would want when it comes to mixing your audio. And then we have a dedicated deliver page, which lets you render for all kinds of different outputs. You can make your movies for Netflix or for YouTube or to keep on your computer. And it's a really, really versatile kind of space for that. So really, we can do everything that we need to do in our project all within Resolve. And we just got to kind of switch it to these different modes, different things to focus on when it comes to post-production.
So Casey, it's awesome to see that DaVinci Resolve can do so much, but let's imagine that I'm coming in here for the first time and I have no idea. I've never used it before. I have no idea to start. What do I do to get started?
Sure. Well, let me open up a new project here. And really the very first thing that you need to do if you want to edit a video is import some media. Now, in the upper left-hand corner here, we have our media pool. And that's this kind of section right here. And if you're editing a video, you can kind of think of it like cooking something, right? And if you want to cook anything, you have to have ingredients. And the media pool is kind of like your fridge or your cabinet. It's kind of where all the ingredients live before you actually do anything with them. So the first thing we need to do is actually bring in some ingredients.
And Casey, when you say media, this is stuff like you could have a video file, say an audio file. You could even have, let's say, a JPEG or a PNG. Like basically any type of media can go in here.
Yeah, pretty much anything that you could possibly add to a video, whether it's a still, whether it's video, whether it's music or audio, anything like that, that's considered media. So here in the edit page, let's go to the media pool, and I'm just going to right click anywhere here in this blank space and go down to import media. And now I'll navigate to wherever all of my media is. Here I have some video files and a piece of music. And we'll go ahead and hit open. Then it's going to pop up with this little dialog, and it's going to ask if we want to change our frame rate.
And Casey, I will say the first time I saw this message, it definitely scared me when I saw this.
Yeah, it kind of seems like one of those, it kind of seems like this life or death decision. Like, are you sure you want to change this really intimidating thing? All it's really saying is, hey, you shot your videos at a certain speed, right? So a video is really multiple pictures per second, right? A lot of videos, 30 frames a second. Some is 24, some is more. But generally, whatever you're shooting, that's usually what you'll want to edit at. And so it's just saying, hey, do you want to change your project to be the same frame rate as this footage that you just brought in? All right, so let's go ahead and hit change. And now our project is set up and we have our media here in our media pool.
And Casey, can I also, could I just drag and drop files in there too? Let's say
Absolutely.
I have File Explorer. Okay. So other ways to get stuff in there as well.
Yep. Yeah. You can just grab something from your Explorer window like this and just drag it in, and that's no problem. So one thing I'm going to do is go up to my workspace here, and I'm going to reset our layout just so that everybody is seeing the exact same thing as me. And by default, there are two viewers here. There's one screen here on the left and one on the right. Now, if I double click on a piece of media here in the media pool, that loads it into this left viewer, which is called the source viewer. Really what this is like picking up a ingredient from your fridge and looking at it, right? This is kind of taking a piece of media and letting you kind of scrub through it and figure out what it is, decide if you like it or not. So this is a great way to preview the media that's in your media pool. And you can also kind of get it ready to drag into the timeline.
And Casey, one question before we start editing these different video files. So I know a lot of people who will end up watching this video, maybe their system isn't quite as performant, or maybe they have an older machine, and they'll notice that DaVinci Resolve might lag a little bit. So when you try to play a media file in the source viewer, you might get a little bit of lag. Is there any way that you can kind of adjust the clip to make it play better?
Yeah, generally it depends on the kind of footage you're shooting. So if you're shooting with a big professional camera, that usually takes a little bit more horsepower under the hood for your computer. If you're shooting with something like your phone, it's probably going to work on a lot of systems, right? One thing that you can do if you're finding that things aren't playing back very well, you can right click and say generate proxy media. Oops. You can right click and say generate proxy media. And what that will do is create a smaller, easier to play version of your video, and it will replace it with that smaller, easier to play version so that it's really easy for you to edit it and your computer doesn't have to struggle. And then right before you render it, what it'll do is switch it back out with the nice media so that your video still looks good, but it's not as hard to edit. Which that brings me kind of to this next part of our interface. That's the timeline. So the timeline is this area down here, and that's really where you build a story. Okay. So so right now I don't have any kind of edit built. I don't have any kind of really story that I've made. All I have are the pieces to the story. So what I can do is grab just the middle of this clip and drag it down into this bottom panel here, and that will throw it onto the timeline. Now, the timeline is just like if you were going to write a sentence, right? If you're going to write a sentence in like Microsoft Word, and you're saying first this happened, then this happened, then this happened. You can kind of do the same thing here with videos. So I can use this video first, and then this video and drag that next to it, and then drag this other video next to it. And really what I'm doing is kind of making a sentence, making a story, right? So first we grab all the cookies, then we pour some milk, and then we look at this cookie. And that's really kind of how you build that story is you take all of those pieces and you put them in the right order in the timeline.
And Casey, I noticed as you start dragging these different video files onto the timeline, I noticed you have your source viewer in the top left, and now there's another viewer to the right of that. Mm-hmm. What is that viewer showing me?
Yeah, so this viewer is the timeline viewer. So just like the source viewer is really taking a look at whatever ingredients you have, the timeline viewer is it's more like tasting the dish, I guess. It's what people are actually going to see when you're done with your project.
So
right?
That's kind of like the full word or the full sentence that you wrote in Word versus the source viewer is kind of the individual words.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
That makes sense.
So yeah, whatever I see up here, that's what people are going to see when they watch my movie. So I can drag any clip from the source viewer into the timeline to add it to my story. But if I don't want the whole clip, I can kind of scrub through this and decide, well, I actually only just want right when that cookie plops in there and I don't want anything after that. I can grab just a part of that clip and put it into my story. The way that you do that is by setting an in and an out. An in is like the beginning of your clip. It's the new beginning. And then an out is the new end, right? So we're kind of just trimming this, and I'll hit, and let's say we want it to start there. I can go here to the bottom part of my viewer, and I can click on this mark in button. What that'll do is set an in point. That's the new start for my clip. And then when I want it to end, let's say right about there, I can set an out like that. I can also hit I or O on the keyboard like that for my keyboard shortcuts. If I want to set an in, I hit I, and an O, and an out for, and O for out. Okay.
And then Casey, that the light gray, that reflects the portion that you've kept, and everything outside of that clip still exists, but you're just not including it, I guess, if you drag it down to the timeline.
Yep. Yeah, none of this is destructive. Like, we're not going to delete part of our clip or something like that. We're really just taking a section of the clip to kind of copy, and we're bringing it down into the timeline to use. Okay, so we're just kind of selecting the part that we want to use for our story. So I want to select just the part where that cookie falls in. I can grab it and drag it down into my story. And here we have just the cookie falling in, and that's the whole clip. Now, let's say I add something to the timeline, but it's too long. And I really should have maybe done this kind of in and out thing before I dragged it down, but it's already in the timeline. Well, I can actually adjust that afterward by moving my playhead around. And I can find the place that I want this to start. So like, let's say right about there. I can grab the beginning of this clip. If I just mouse over and my little mouse kind of I can just mouse over, and if my mouse turns into a bracket, I can grab the edge of this and move it that way, and it'll snap to that playhead. And so now that's where the clip starts. And let's say I want the clip to end right there. I can do the same thing for the end. I can grab the edge and move it this way like that. So that's called trimming. I can also move the edges of two clips at once. If I mouse over and then there's the two little brackets, I can grab that and kind of trim the end of one clip and the beginning of the next clip like that. And I can kind of decide where that cut goes in between those two clips. So that's a big thing. And then I also can split a clip really easily. If I go up to my tools here, this fourth tool over is called the blade. I can also hit B on the keyboard to bring that up. And then wherever I click here with my mouse, that's going to split that clip. A great way to do that is to grab the playhead and decide exactly when we want that to split. And then again, this will kind of snap to the playhead and split right there where my playhead is. And then if I want to move stuff around again, I can just switch back to the selection mode, or I can hit A on the keyboard.
And then Casey, what if I bring something down to my timeline, but I decide like, hey, I don't want this on my timeline, or I want to remove it. How do I get rid of a clip?
Yeah. Again, it's a lot like Microsoft Word. You can select the part that you don't want and hit backspace or hit delete, and that will get rid of it. If I do hit backspace, it's going to leave a gap here. And this gap is kind of a problem because when we play this back, we're just going to see black right here. And you generally don't want to just have no video at all because it's going to turn black, right? It's best to have all of the clips touching each other. So what I can do is select this empty space and hit backspace again. And that will kind of suck all the clips down to where there's no space in between them. Or if I know that I want to get rid of something, I can just hit delete, like the smaller delete key above the arrows on the keyboard. And that will kind of do both of those things at once. It'll get rid of that clip and it'll also suck all the other clips down so that we don't have that space. If I want to move a clip around, I can just grab it in the middle and move it around like this. I can move it back and forth, and I can move it up and down. And if I move it up, that's going to bring it up to this second layer. So the higher numbers for these video tracks, that means that they're going to have priority, right? So if I put this clip over these two blue clips, we're only going to see this milk pouring clip because it's in the layer above those two. So if I move it off, we can see that we see the clip under it until it runs into this upper layer.
And then Casey, what if you showed how to move just an individual clip? What if I want to move a group of clips? Can I also just highlight multiple clips and then move them either forward or back or wherever I want to put them?
Yeah, there are a lot of different ways to do it. But a lot of the time you can just click in some empty space and kind of marquee select a bunch of clips like that. And then you can move them all around as one.
And then with clips on my timeline, like I saw that you zoomed in a little bit, then you zoomed out. How do I adjust the view of the timeline so I can see what I need to see?
Yeah. So the way to kind of zoom in and out in the timeline is with this little slider here. That's probably the easiest way. You can move that back and forth to zoom in and out in the horizontal axis. You can also hold down Alt and roll with your scroll wheel. And I can move stuff around by kind of clicking and dragging on these little dividers here. I can kind of resize things. If I hold down Shift and roll with my scroll wheel, that will zoom in kind of vertically. And so I can really kind of move around and zoom in and out by using Shift and Alt and my scroll wheel, or I can use this kind of slider. If I'm zoomed way in, what I like to do is kind of grab the timeline and move it around like this so that I can view other things. And you do that by clicking and dragging with the middle button on your mouse. That's the scroll wheel button, right? So you push down on your scroll wheel and you can kind of grab this and move it back and forth. And so that's a great way to kind of move back and forth in the timeline without having to zoom out. And that works for everything. Like I can middle button mouse click on any of these viewers. I'll just reset my layout here so we don't get lost. So really that's kind of the basics of moving around here in the timeline. And now that we've kind of gone over that, let's build a story. So this is typically how I would make an edit, is I would start double clicking on things in the media pool to open up my media. And I can go through and decide which parts of each clip I want to use. So let's say And what I like to do is kind of get in a little bit late. So we'll just get in like right as you're starting to open this oven. I'll hit I for in to start the clip. And then right as you pull this out, let's just go ahead and hit O for out right there. Now I can add this to the timeline a couple ways. I can drag this down into the timeline like we've been doing, but I can also drag this over our timeline viewer, and we see we have this kind of overlay here. And depending on what I drag this on top of, whatever is highlighted white, that is going to put that clip into my timeline in a certain way. And there's a bunch of different things that you can play with. What I really like is append at end. So let's just do that. It's not going to matter for this first one because it's just going to put it into the timeline. But basically wherever your playhead is, that's where it's going to put this new clip if you drag it over here. So if I hit insert, it's going to put that clip right there. The cool thing that I like about append at end is if I grab this clip and drag it over append at end, no matter where my playhead is, it's always going to put it at the very end of my clips. So this is a really great way to just add a new part to the story each time. And so that's what I like to do is kind of go through, double click, and I'll hit in and out, and then drag this over to append at end, and that will add it to the end of my sequence. And I can kind of go through and decide what parts of what clips I want, append at end. And it's a really quick way to build the really rough story. That's kind of what I like to do first is build the rough story first, and then we'll go through and mess with it later. Yeah, so we pretty much follow that until we have our whole story built.
Hey, Casey, this story's looking good. I think the commercial's coming together, but I think we need some music to go along with it. So how do we get music on the timeline as well?
Sure. Well, anything with audio is very similar to how we treat video, right? So you have to have your music in your media pool, and we do have some that we imported earlier. I can double click on that, and that'll add it to this source viewer right here. And I can grab the middle of this and drag it down into another track.
And then Casey, with the source viewer, do I have all the same controls? Like I could set an in point, I could set an out point, I could do all that same stuff.
Yep, same thing. If you just want a piece of the music, you could, hit I for in and then move over and hit O for out to just select like the first part if you want to. So now we have our music here under our audio, which is great. Unlike the video layers, the audio layers, you'll be able to hear everything regardless of where it is, because the audio can all happen at the same time, but you can really only look at one thing at the same time, right? So here we'll hear our on-camera audio as well as our music. Sometimes we might want that and sometimes we might not. If we decide that we don't want our audio from our camera, we can go to this left part of this track header here, and there's a couple buttons here that kind of let you adjust things about the track, but this right here, this M lets you mute the track. So I can click that and that will just mute anything that's on this track. And now we'll just hear the music without the on-camera audio.
And Casey, the music sounds a little bit loud. How can I adjust the volume of the music?
You can't.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I had to. It's been too long since it's been silly. Okay. Yeah, it's super easy if you want to adjust the volume. One thing is you can zoom in and grab this little white line here and drag it up and down, and that will change the volume of whatever audio clip you have. But kind of a more exact way would be to select the clip and then go up to the inspector. So the inspector is in the upper right-hand corner. It's hidden by default. If you click on this, that'll bring up our inspector window. And here's where you can actually kind of dial in your exact volume that you want. You can even double click on this little number and type an exact number that you want for your volume. Now, this inspector works for anything that you have selected. So if I grab a piece of media, all of its properties pretty much I can adjust in the inspector here, from volume for audio, as well as video things like zooming, moving it around, that kind of thing.
And Casey, what if a lot of times I just want to play with these different values to see how they look, but what if I, somehow change it to some value I don't like? Is there some way I could reset it or go back to what it originally was?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything in Resolve has these little circle arrow icons, and those will reset whatever it's next to, right? So if I have my zoom all messed up, I can go over here to this little reset and click that, and everything's back to normal.
And what if I mess with a whole bunch of these different values? Is there some way I could just reset everything and bring it back to the original state?
Yeah, a lot of the time in a panel, you'll have, if you have a few things messed up like this, there'll be kind of a master reset button right here that has a plus in the middle. You can click that and that'll reset everything for that section. So this kind of exists for any of the sections here in the inspector, as well as other places in Resolve.
Cool. And I think the audio sounds, I think the volume level is a lot better now. At the very end of this commercial though, I want to cut the end of the audio and also maybe have it fade out. I think that'd be kind of a nice touch if it kind of fades out nicely at the end. How do I do that?
Yeah. So first of all, quick keyboard shortcut. If you hit Shift Z, that will zoom out to the whole length of the timeline so you can see everything. And so that's a great way to zoom out, especially in a situation like this where I want to maybe grab the end of our media and where I want to grab the end of our music and then trim this back. So I'm just going to do it just like you would with a video track. I'm going to go over the edge until I have the bracket, and then I'm just going to trim this back to be right in line with the video there. So it's shorter, but we do need to have it fade out. So now I can grab this little handle, this little white handle, and I can drag this to the left, and that makes this little ramp here. And what that really means is it's turning the volume down. Okay, so it's kind of like starting, so it starts louder, and then it turns it down over time. And we can make it fade out really slowly by kind of making this bigger, or we can have it fade out really fast by making it small.
And Casey, when I hover over a video file, I think I get that same handle. What does that do for video?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the same idea. It fades it out. So here, if we want to fade to black, I can just grab this same thing and have it fade to black.
Oh, very nice.
Fade to
I
black
like that.
like that.
I like that.
Yeah.
Looks good. All right, Casey, this, I like it with the music. It sounds good, but there are a few more things as I'm looking at this. I want to make a few tweaks to it, and I was hoping you could help me with that.
Sure.
So first off, if we look at that second clip of the milk pouring, I really like that shot. But compared to, say, the third clip, it looks a little bit dimmer and not quite as bright. How can I brighten things up a little bit?
So again, one of the really cool things about Resolve is it can kind of get as detailed as you want. Resolve actually started as a like Hollywood level color corrector. And so any problems with color, it's really pretty easy just to jump into the color page. Now, all of the pages in Resolve share the same timeline. So I don't have to convert anything. I don't have to save anything out or anything like that. All I have to do is go down to where it says color right here and click on that. And what that'll do is open my same timeline here in the color page. And if this looks intimidating, if this is kind of scary, no worries. Really, all it's doing is it's taking each shot in my story and it's giving us a thumbnail right here. And if we click on the thumbnail, we can not only see it here in the viewer, but also this is what we're going to be adjusting. So if I want to make this clip brighter, all I have to do is click on the thumbnail for this clip and use one of the tools that brightens things up. So a simple tool would be this this offset section here on this left panel. And down here at the bottom, there's this little slider. I'd grab this and drag that to the right a little bit. And what that's going to do is brighten things up. That just kind of increases the brightness of the whole clip. Again, you don't need to know everything in the world about color correction. You can literally just fix a lot of the problems, which, a lot of the color problems are actually based on how bright or dark things are, just with that one slider. If you just know that, you can like balance out your footage quite a bit, actually. And once it's all done, once this looks nice, all I have to do is switch back to the edit page. I'll just click on edit. And now those new colors are reflected here in our timeline. I can turn this off and on by clicking this little rainbow button right here, and that will bypass any color correction I've done. And I can see the difference. Here's where it was, and here's where we are now. Is that better?
That looks a lot better. Nice edit. And one thing is, so I know within the color page there is a ton of functionality,
Hmm.
and I know you only touched on just one thing you could do there, and of course you could do so much more on that page. But I did want to call out your YouTube channel again, where you have some videos that go in depth on what you can do on the color page. So if you are interested in learning more about color, I'd highly recommend checking that out. And there's a link to a video in the description down below.
Yeah. And that video that we're linking is going to be a video that is perfect for anybody who's new to color correction. It starts at the very basics and teaches you kind of the need to know things. You know, if you've never done color, that is a great place to start.
At the very end of the commercial, I
Hmm.
show the Kevin Cookie Company logo,
Yeah.
and I want it to be a little bit more actionable. And I think including the website here would be a nice touch. How do I get some text on this clip so people know where to navigate to?
Yeah. Any of the fancy things that you want to add in the edit page live in the effects panel. So up here where it says media pool, right next to it is effects. And if we click on that, that's going to open a little panel down here that has all of our effects in it. So one of the simplest effects to add is text. So if we go down to titles, there's one that is appropriately called text. And we can grab this and drag that into our timeline just like a piece of media. We can move it around just like a piece of media. We can grab the edges and trim it just like a piece of media. And and we can put it on this upper layer and we can see things under it, right? So, of course, you probably don't want it to say basic title, I would imagine. So we can select this and go up to our inspector. And here under title, we have all of our text controls. So we can say Kevin. So let's put your website here. All right. So we have kevincookie.company.com. We can change the font. Let's go with, and you can use any font that is installed in your system. Change the size. And there's a whole bunch of different properties that, again, if you've used Microsoft Word, should make a whole lot of sense. It's really common text kind of stuff. And I can even adjust the position here using these little position controls. And I'll just bring this down something like that. So now we have your website over our title.
And then Casey, here too, I could also, if I want to say have it fade in or fade out, I could also use that fade handle here too.
Yep, exact same way. I can grab this and have it fade in. Maybe we'll have it fade out kind of the same way like that. Let's see how that looks. There we go. Yeah.
Nice. And then,
What?
Casey, I noticed when you were moving the text around, you used the inspector to do that. Is there any other way that I could kind of position the text where I want it? Like, could I just drag and drop it where I want it?
Yeah, you can actually turn on an overlay. So in this lower left-hand part of our viewer here, there's this little button. And if we open the menu, there are a bunch of different fancy things we can choose from. If we click transform, that puts a little white box around anything that we have selected. And I can change this, move it around, and kind of drag it pretty intuitively like this. So that's a way that you can do it as well. A couple of other fancy things with the inspector is, let's say I like this clip, but I want it to be a little bit more lively. We can actually take this and kind of automatically have it zoom out using something called dynamic zoom. So I can select this in our timeline and then go over here to dynamic zoom and just turn it on. And what that'll do is it'll start zoomed in and it'll kind of zoom out over time. And it will do that for the length of the clip. You can even select multiple clips and turn on dynamic zoom. And that will have them all kind of zooming out. So that's great if you're building a slideshow, if you want to make everything just a little bit more dynamic. That's a great way to add that in just like one click.
And Casey, what if, so I know it's zooming out. What if I wanted to zoom in instead?
Yeah,
how do I change that?
you can select whatever clip you have. And here under dynamic zoom, it's kind of hard to tell by default, but if you double click on it, there are some options. And if I just click on swap, I can zoom out to in instead. The last fancy thing I want to show you in the edit page is how to add a transition. Generally, we just have these clips cutting from one to another. which I would recommend most of the time, but sometimes you want to add a little bit of style, right? So we can go over to our effects, and here under video transitions, we have a whole bunch of different video transitions we can add. And if you mouse over them, you can kind of see a preview here of what that transition would look like. And there's all kinds of different things. So you can really spend some time looking at what you want to do. But once you find one that you like, I like this push transition here. You can grab it and drag it into your timeline, and you'll notice that it doesn't work to just drag it on top of something like a piece of media. It gives you a no, right? That's because you have to drag it in between clips. So if you drag it in between two clips like this, what this will do is put that transition from one clip to another. And you can adjust how long that transition lasts by grabbing the edges and scaling it like this. So you can have a fast transition like that, or you can have a really slow transition if you want to drag it out like that.
And Casey, I know when we've looked at text or video or audio, each one of them has access to the inspector. Can we also do that with the transition to edit, say which way it goes, or can we adjust some of these settings?
Yeah. If you select the transition and go up to the inspector, there's all the different kind of settings here. I could even do something like feather this, which if I click feather and then push up the border like this, that will kind of add a little bit of blur to that edge, which sometimes you might want. So that's pretty much how you work in the edit page. The one thing that I do want to mention is that there are a bunch of keyboard shortcuts. For instance, if you use J, K, and L, that kind of plays. You can use that to, if you hit L, you can play forward, K pauses, and J plays it back. And you can kind of use that to kind of scrub around in your timeline. That also works in your source viewer. And so that's a great way to kind of go back and forth, hit an in and an out using J, K, L, and I and O. And there's a lot to learn when it comes to keyboard shortcuts. You can actually go up to, in the upper left where it says DaVinci Resolve, and go down to keyboard customization. And that will bring up this window, and you can look up what each key does. So for instance, T changes things to trim mode, Y selects clips forward. And you can even search by commands like append, and you can even assign your own keystrokes based on what you do most often.
Casey, this video file is looking great. I think it's coming together nicely. How do I prepare it to, say, bring to YouTube or Facebook? How do I get it out of DaVinci Resolve?
Yeah. So basically, anytime that you want to put something on the internet, or you want somebody to look at your footage without having to actually load your whole project in their DaVinci Resolve, you have to render it. So it's kind of like if you're making a cake, you have to actually bake the cake and put it on the plate, right? Or else people are never going to see it, or never going to taste it. So there are a couple different ways to render things in Resolve. The easiest thing, if you just want to stay on the edit page, is just to go up to File and go down to Quick Export. And we have all these presets that are available. If you want to render for YouTube, you can just click on YouTube. You can even sign into your YouTube account through Resolve and just have it upload directly to YouTube right out of Resolve, which is really nice. And the same works for Vimeo and Twitter, Dropbox, that kind of thing. But that's a great way to, even if you don't want to sign into YouTube, you can make a video that has the right settings and will look pretty good if you upload it to YouTube eventually. And then all you have to do is just hit export. And that will, and you pick a place to put that, and then you can save it. And it takes a couple minutes depending on how complicated your video is, how long it is, what size it is, all of that kind of thing. And then once it's completed, you'll have a video file that you can upload, or that you can, put on an iPad or whatever you'd like to do.
All right. Well, Casey, thank you so much for walking us through the basics of DaVinci Resolve so people could get started editing videos.
Yeah, of course. It was super fun. I love helping with this stuff, and really exciting to be on the channel, man. It's an honor.
Yeah, and we finally have we had a professional help pull together our commercial, so we are ready to sell more cookies. To watch more content on DaVinci Resolve, once again, Casey has just an awesome channel with tons and tons of content that go in depth on DaVinci Resolve. So chances are if you're looking to learn something in DaVinci Resolve, Casey has likely already done a video on it. Also, he has a very comprehensive course. I think it's about 8 hours worth of content. So if you truly want to learn all of the ins and outs of DaVinci Resolve, this course is an excellent choice. So I'd also recommend checking that out. And once again, you'll find it down below in the description. To watch more videos like this one, please consider subscribing. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.